everybody. Welcome. It's so nice to see a gathering of people from all different places. So as you know, we find ourselves now in the time right before the holiday of Purim. And this is the month of Adar, which is the happiest month of the year. And the miracle of Purim came about with the help of two special people, Mordecai and the Queen Esther. And by gathering the Jewish nation together, they were able to bring about this redemption. And here we are together, gathered. And when Jewish people gather like this, we see what great strength it has and how much power it has. But even more than that, Mordecai and Esther, it says in the Megillah that Mordecai took Esther to be his daughter. However, our rabbis comment on that it's not actually his daughter, but he took her to be his house, to make his house, to be his wife. And we see that Mordecai and Esther throughout the Megillah story, even when they were no longer able to be together in the same house, because Esther had been taken to the palace, only by working together were they able to bring about the miracle. So today we're lucky to have Chanah Weisberg, who, as many of you may know, is an author, a writer, the editor of theJewishWoman.org, and she hopefully will help us learn the secret of Mordecai and Esther, the secret of working together, and how we can do this in the way that is prescribed to us in the Torah. Thank you.
Good evening. It's such a pleasure to be here. At least for me, my throat wasn't so happy to be here, so it stayed at home. But I hope you'll hear me anyways. And tonight we're going to make everyone happy. We're talking about marriage, right? What could be happier than that? So I want to start by telling you about a man who had a store. We'll call him Yankel. Yankel had a store and he was doing very well in his store. Until one day, a big mega superstore decided to open right next door to him. And suddenly Yankel started to get very worried. But trouble became even worse because a few weeks later, on the other side of him, another super mega store opened. So here he had one super mega store that said, "Will not be undersold." And then on the other side, he had this other huge store which had a sign, "Lowest prices guaranteed." So Yankel was really worried, and he decided to go to his friend. And he says to his friend, "What am I going to do? Here's my little store, and on both sides I have all these stores, all these big signs. What am I to do?" So his friend says to him, "Yankel, don't worry. It's not a problem. It's very simple. The solution is you also put up a sign on top of your store. They have a sign, they have a sign. You put on top of your store also a sign. And what should your sign be? Main entrance." There are times that we think there's Cyrus on this side, there's problems on this side, there's problems from all around, and we really have the main entrance, the truth of how to tackle these issues in a way that's productive and a way that works for all of us. It's working? So we all know that relationships are difficult. Some of the best-selling books are on relationships, how to make relationships better. Men are from Mars, women are from Venus, and on and on and on. Relationships sell because we all have relationship problems. So when we think back to the beginning of the world, before the world, there was really no relationship. There was God and God alone. And at a certain point, God had a desire. He had a desire to actually have a relationship. He was completely perfect and on his own, and he had a desire to have a relationship with with seemingly autonomous beings, and that's why he created our world. When we are in a mode where we're absorbed with ourselves, and ourselves are all that we need, and we don't care about anybody else, we are in a pre-creation mode. When we're in the mode of reaching out to another, of sharing ourselves with another, only then are we truly alive. And where do we find the greatest place? The place where God actually communicated to us, spoke to us, the highest godly experience. We're told in the temple there was a place where, on top of the Aron, in the Holy of Holies, where we had two kruvim, two cherubic faces, a masculine face and a feminine face. And these two forms were looking at each other. And it was from there that God's voice communicated to mankind. So where can we find the highest godly experience? Only when we're capable of looking into the face of another. And sometimes when we look into the face of another, we don't really like everything that we see. Because when you're really looking in the face of another, you're going to see their needs, their wants, their emotions, things that are going through them. And it's not always so pleasant to see these things, and we're not always ready to see these things. But where can we find the greatest godly experience? Only when we're ready to look into the face of another and welcome them into our world. So I want to travel back to the very beginning of time, before there was actually Mars and Venus, to the actual time of the Garden of Eden, to see a template there of how to have success in our marriage today. In order to do so, what I'd like you to do on your pieces of paper that you have on your handouts, we're up to secret number 1. What I'd like you to do is to write down what you feel is men's and women's 4 greatest disconnects or complaints. So the woman could write down what your greatest complaints are against the men, and the man could write down what you feel are their greatest complaints against the woman. So it could be she doesn't, or he doesn't, or he's not enough of, blah, blah, blah. Whatever you feel are the greatest complaints. And then we'll go into what studies say about men and women, and what studies have found men and women feel are these greatest complaints. So let's just jot that down now. And then I'll ask you to share it. I see some people scribbling furiously. And some people just thinking. Okay, let's start with the woman. What do you feel are your greatest complaints, or not yours, but women's greatest complaints against men? Yes? So he's not present when I'm talking to him. Good. He doesn't give me his full attention when I'm talking to him. Great. Did you want to say something? No. Okay. Someone else? Yes?
Won't help out with the family company.
More, sorry?
They won't help with the family company.
More helping with the family?
Yeah, the company. The company. We have a company.
Oh, company with family business. Good. Okay. Great. Yes. So men feel that women...
They have to help out in the family company. It's mandatory.
Okay. And that's their complaint. Good.
Well, that's my complaint.
And that's your... Okay. What other complaints do women have against men?
Oh,
Yes.
sorry.
Yeah, we're still with the women. We're going to get to that in a second. Yeah? Sorry?
Too emotional.
That the men are too emotional?
Yes.
The men are too emotional.
That's my experience.
Good, okay, great. It's usually I get the other way. So we're going to talk about that reversal role also. Go ahead.
Lack of sensitivity and caring.
Lack of sensitivity and caring, that's a big one.
Men try to solve problems instead of listening to them.
solve problems instead of listening to them. Great. Any others? Yes?
At home, like organizing, like keep organized.
Keep things organized and neat. Good. Like their laundry? Okay. Anyone else? Yes?
Okay, this is my complaint about something.
Wait, this is the men's or the women's?
On the part of me as a male.
So yeah, okay, so we're up to the men. Good.
Okay, not always explaining what she wants or needs at the time.
Not explaining what she wants or needs. Good. Big one.
Somewhat similar, not being direct with what their preferences are.
Not being direct.
So,
Just
for
saying it
example,
like it is.
a man may have a tendency to be a problem solver, trying to be helpful. But if a woman says, I really just need you to listen to it, many men would say, oh, fine, thanks
Sure.
for letting me know,
Just tell
reminding me. I mean,
Right.
because they have a general tendency. So
Excellent.
I would love to see women to be much more direct.
Direct,
Nice, but
good.
very
Good
direct.
point. Excellent. Uh-huh.
Are we limited?
It's okay. You can go ahead.
Thank you. Okay, some women in some relationships tend to be too judgmental if the guy falls short for one reason or another.
Judgmental, critical, good. Good. In all areas, good. Anything else? Okay, great. These are great things that are very common. Now, before I just show you what it says on the test, I have to make one general statement. And that applies to this whole part of the lecture, especially when we're talking about the men and the women. We will be making some stereotypical comments, some generalities. Now, I'm glad you said that the men, the men are too sensitive, right? Because what happens is, that's usually a woman's complaint. So we are going to be making some generalities and some stereotypes. Now, when we do that, the reason why generalities are generalities is because usually they apply. The reason why stereotypes are stereotypes is because usually they apply. So usually you'll say men are taller than women. That does not mean that you won't find many women who are taller than any given man. But we usually have these stereotypes and these generalities. Now, we are going to be talking a lot about men and women, and when we're talking, what we're really talking about is masculine and feminine tendencies. If you are a woman who has masculine tendencies, that's great. If you're a man who has feminine tendencies, that's great. What we're basically talking about is two modes of being. And if you see a reversal of roles in your relationship, that's fine. The basic understanding is just to understand how it works in these two different modes. So I just want to get that out of the way to begin with. And now we get to the fun stuff. Okay, I'm going to show you 4 complaints, and you're going to tell me who you think, is it the man or the woman that complained this way? This is from a study. You never listen to me.
Women.
You never help around the house.
Woman,
You don't spend enough time with me.
woman,
We never go anywhere anymore. Here's the other 4. You're always trying to change me. Men. You're letting yourself go. Woo, we're going to talk more about that one. Yes, not my study, sorry, but we'll talk about that one. You're nagging me to death. Men. You blame me for everything. Huh? You blame me for everything. If we take these 4 complaints and we put them in a nutshell, what women are really saying is, when we were dating, or when at the beginning of our relationship, I felt like I was the center of your world. Now I feel like I'm just a piece of old furniture that you totally take for granted. And that's why they're asking, let's go out more, let's spend time together, you don't listen to me, etc. If we look at the general complaints of the men, they're basically saying, in the beginning of our relationship, I was the world to you. I was everything. I we find a template for this, for how to have a good relationship, and God gives us the keys for it. When we look back at how creation was, we look at 6 days of phenomenal creation. Finally, on the 6th day, man, Adam, is created. Now, Adam has everything in front of him. Everything you could possibly want. The entire world is there. Luscious fruits, paradise, whatever he wants is there. And you know what? He didn't even have to share it with anyone because he was the only person. So everything is there for his taking. And God looks at this man and he says, uh-oh, this is not good. This is not good. This creation that I made, this is not good. Now we're talking about God making creation, okay? So there's not very many times that you actually hear God saying something that God made is not good. But God says, this isn't good. Man being here alone is not good. And in fact, this is what part of God's plan, to create him alone, so he himself felt this way. He looks at everything, and he has everything, and yet he's feeling this existential loneliness. So in the beginning of all time, God is giving man, Adam, and all future Adams, a message. He's saying to him, you can have everything at your fingertips. You could be at the pinnacle of your career. You could be having success, wealth, whatever you could possibly want, honor, everything. But you're nothing without her. So don't forget her. Make her the center of your world, because that's what she is. Remember her and value her, because that's woman's number one complaint. He doesn't value me. He takes me for granted. On the other hand, what does God say to women? When woman is created, she's called an Ezer Kenegdo, a helpmate for him. She's supposed to help him. You know, as women, we tend to look at a situation and we see the potential of what could be. So you look at like a table and you say, oh, I could put this over here and that over there and this color and throw in this and that and whoa, it's going to be great. Right? We do that all the time. And this color and that color. And we do the same thing to our husbands or our people who we're in a relationship with. Yeah, that looks good, but oh, it would be so much better with da-da-da-da-da-da. And what God is saying, be his Ezer. Don't try to change him, but be his helpmate. So the words that you say, the praise that you give, be his number one fan, because that's what he needs. That's like oxygen that runs through his blood. Admire him, respect him. This is in the very first pages of Genesis. We see this template of how the secret, running through it, of how to have this good relationship. Now there's this great teaching from the Talmud on these lines. It's one of my favorites. And it says, a man must always be careful never to offend his wife, because her tears come readily, her pain comes quickly. One of the reasons why this is one of my favorite relationship teaching is not because it says about what a man must do to a woman. I believe this is something that's generic for male and female, both of them. And what I like so much about it is that Rav doesn't say, be careful not to offend her because you have to be a nice person. You have to be nice and sensitive to her. He says, don't offend her because her tears come readily. Her pain comes quickly. In other words, Rav is saying to men and women and anyone in any kind of relationship with anybody, it's not good enough for you to treat her the way you want to be treated. Treat her the way she wants to be treated. You know, very often we think, oh, if I'm treating the other person like I want to be treated, that's great. I mean, that's amazing. And he's saying, no, that's not good enough. If she's going to be crying because of it, even though you think it would be silly or inconsequential, that is your problem, and you can't do it. I have a friend who has a special needs child, and daily she's dealing with things literally like life and death. And she said to me once, you know, Chanah, I just can't sweat the small stuff. You know, I see people who are just getting upset over the silliest things, and to me, I just can't handle it. And I said, you know, I'm fortunate to not be in your situation, and I can't really relate to what you're saying, but you gotta realize that for them, that small stuff is the big stuff. You know, they don't have your deeper perspective on the reality of this world. And so for them, that little stuff really is the big stuff. And that's the message that Rob is teaching us, that we can't feel like we have to do what we want, we have to do what she wants. And that's why it's so important to really understand, well, what is it that she wants? Or what is it that he wants? And how can we communicate in a way that expresses that? Before we go on to that communication, though, back to the pages of Genesis, you know, I often think, what would have happened if things would have been a little different? You know, Adam and Eve, they eat from the forbidden fruit, and then they get banished from the Garden of Eden. And I often think, what would have happened if things would have been a little different? Now, I don't mean if they didn't eat from the forbidden fruit, because I believe that none of us are created to be perfect. We're not these automatic, perfect little computers that have to react perfectly. We're supposed to be making mistakes and learning from it. So I don't mean that they didn't make the mistake. But imagine if after they had sinned, if Adam had gone over to God, or Chava had gone over to God and said, oh, you know, I just can't believe it. You tell me one thing not to do, one little measly thing that I can't eat, one fruit, and there I go and eat it. I'm just like so embarrassed about myself. Could you imagine what I did? Are you going to ever be able to trust me again? I can't believe it. How do you think God would have reacted? It's kind of hard to be angry at somebody who's so upset and apologetic about what they did, isn't it? But instead, what do? First, they hide. Like, who are you hiding from? God, after all. I mean, God who created you, you're hiding from him? Come on. But they hide. Then, they deny. Oh, we didn't do anything. You're denying from God? God sees everything. And then when they're finally put against the wall, they say, oh, well, Adam says, well, she made me do it. And she says, the snake made me do it. Blame. Hide, deny, blame. Think about it. In our relationships, don't we all go through that? We hide, thinking that, oh, it's going to be just blown over. We deny that we did anything wrong. And then when we finally are put against the wall, oh, well, you should have told me something different, or you should have helped me along, or you should have. Right? Hide, deny, and blame. Now, I have two daughters who are both married, thank God. I have 4 delicious grandchildren. And when my oldest daughter got married, I remember something really amazing at the chuppah. You know, the chuppah is, of course, the ceremony at the wedding, the most momentous time, the most emotional time. And after the bride circles the groom, and after you say all the different blessings, you do this act where you take this cup or this glass and you break it. And after it's broken, everyone shouts, Mazel Tov, right? That's when everyone starts shouting Mazel Tov, and that's when the ceremony is complete. And we start with the dancing and the celebration. Now, of course, the reason why we break a glass at a wedding is because even when we are in such a state of absolute happiness, such joy, we need to remember that we are in exile and the temple is destroyed, and therefore our joy is never complete. But as I was watching this whole ceremony, it almost felt like it was the breaking of the glass that caused the mazel tov, right? It was almost like the mazel tov only comes because you broke the glass, and that without the breaking of the glass, there could be no mazel tov. So I was thinking about that, and I was thinking that perhaps the message for us all is the groom thinks that he's getting a bride who's faultless to the core. Amazing. The bride thinks likewise about her groom, that he's just perfect. Perfection. the most perfect being that could be. And both of them are thinking about this perfect life that they're going to be building together, their accomplishments, the children they're going to have, the perfect world that they're going to be building. And as these thoughts are going through their heads about this wonderful, lovely, dreamy fantasy world, we take a cup and we break it. And we say, hold on. Right now we're in Galut. We're in exile. And in exile there is no perfection. No one is perfect. And the groom you're marrying is not perfect, and the bride you're marrying is not perfect. They each have faults and fissures and cracks and holes. And you know what? That's okay. They're still deserving of love. And the vision that you have of what you're going to be building together, that's also not full. Not correct. It's not perfect. It's not going to be perfect because it can't be perfect. And that's okay. You're still worthy and deserving of love, nevertheless. And only when we can all come to that recognition, the bride, the groom, and everyone present, can we finally say, Mazel Tov. May it be with Mazel. We can start repairing our world because we've accepted each other for who and what we are. And I think that's an important message in relationships. So we're talking about valuing each other and valuing each other differently according to what each needs. But sometimes this could be so hard because we almost speak different languages. And how then are we able to communicate with each other? So let's go through some of the things that women say and what they would mean. She says, are you listening to me? What does she mean?
Well, my interpretation is that she might be asking the guy, is he fully focused on what she's stating verbally as well as non-verbally, really tuning into the feelings?
You think so? You really think so?
Possibly.
Possibly. Okay, what she's really saying when she says, are you listening to me? Is, too late, you're doomed. You're obviously not listening to me. Forget it, it's over with. She says, I'm not yelling. What does she mean? Huh? Yes, I am. I think this is important. Okay, this one you're gonna all get. He asks, what's wrong? She says, nothing. Everything. She means everything. Never take a nothing.
That seems so indirect. It's sort of like
you
just want him to guess.
And that's exactly what we're going to get to. Thank you. She says, do I look fat? What does she mean?
Am I beautiful?
Exactly. Good. Got some points there. She means, tell me I'm beautiful. She wonders, why doesn't he communicate his feelings more openly? He wonders, why must she analyze everything I say or do? And the last one, she wonders, why can't he be more in tune with my feelings? And this is exactly what you're saying. He wonders, am I supposed to be a mind reader? How am I supposed to know? So again, if we look back to the story of Genesis, we see why women communicate the way they do and why men communicate the way they do. And for this, let's turn to page 2 on your handouts. And let's read. Who would like to read? Thank you. So what we're reading here is 2 phrases from Genesis chapter 1 and Genesis chapter 2. And we're going to look at the wording pretty clearly, and we're going to see a big difference. This is what God commands. In Genesis, we already said that it was just Adam. And in Genesis chapter 2, we have already Chava coming into being, Eve. Go ahead.
So Genesis chapter 1, secret number 2, isn't her languages of communication. Genesis chapter 1, conquer, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it, and rule over the fish of the sea and over the fowl of the sky and over all of the beasts that
at this point, by the way, was an androgynous being, meaning he had male, masculine, and feminine characteristics, and therefore he was able to actually be fruitful and multiply. But that's not the point. The point is, at that point, we have Adam, this masculine Adam, and the command that God tells him at this point is conquer, fill, subdue, rule over. We have this feeling of conquest, making hierarchy, making rule and order over creation. Chapter 2, we have a very different version. This is where Chava comes into being, and here God commands something very differently. Go ahead.
Chapter 2, nurturer, and God planted a garden in Eden from
The east.
the east. Now God took the man and he placed him in the garden of Eden to keep it in garden.
So here we have, there's a tree that's planted, we have keeping, we have guarding, we have a garden, a home for God. Notice the difference in the vocabulary between ruling and conquest and developing rulership and hierarchy versus guarding, protecting, nurturing. In a nutshell, when we talk about the differences between men and women, according to Kabbalah and according to Torah, we have men given the role and having the emotional capacity of conquest, whereas women have the role more of nurturing and guarding, finding the implicit godliness that's already within creation. When we talk about in the language of Kabbalah, we actually have two shapes. We have a circle and a line. And physiologically, emotionally, spiritually, in all ways, men and women resemble the circle and the line. Women are the circle, men are the line. Now let's think about that for a moment. Let's go back to the marriage ceremony again, where we see this imagery of the circle and line throughout. We see the bride encircle the groom 7 times, or different customs have different numbers, but we do it 7 times. We see the groom putting the ring, circle, on the bride's finger, forefinger, okay, the line. We also see the ketubah, which is a paper, which is a line, which then gets rolled up into a circle and a line. Combination of circle and line together. So we have this imagery of the circle and line throughout the marriage ceremony, and we do that because we are bringing together a circle and a line. Now when we think emotionally, there's really 2 ways of getting to a destination. If you're at point A and you want to go to point B, there's 2 ways to do it. You can go from point A in a straight line to point B, and you'll get there in the fastest way possible. Or you can go from point A to point B in a circular motion, and you'll get there much slower than going straight, but you'll also make a lot more points of contact along the way.
Actually, on a sphere, the shortest distance is the circular one.
Interesting.
Called the Great Circle. That's why the ships that went between Europe and America didn't go directly across, they went on an arc. Because on a sphere, the shortest distance is an arc.
Okay, and then we can argue later that that could possibly mean that the circular sometimes is
It's the best way, yeah.
but we're getting ahead of ourselves. Great point, thank you. So we have the circle and the line. Now, let me give you an example of a couple who are doing the circle and the line. Barry and Sarah are going on a road trip. And they're in the car driving. They have a few hours ahead of them. After some time passes, Sarah turns to Barry and she says, "You know, there's a rest area coming up just ahead. Would you possibly want to stop at the rest area to get a cold drink or a cup of coffee?" And Barry says, "No," just as he drives past the rest area. For the next 10 minutes in the car, there is a deafening silence. After about 10 minutes, Barry realizes there's a deafening silence. And he reviews in his brain the last lines of communication between him and Sarah. And for the life of him, he can't figure out what he did wrong. She asked if I want a cup of coffee. I said no. Now every Sarah in this room knows that when Sarah asked if he wants to stop for a cup of coffee, she was coffee. Now every Barry in this room knows that you would have been happy to stop for her to get a cup of coffee if only she would have, and this is what you were saying before, if only she would have asked. Now every Sarah in this room knows that the reason why she didn't ask was because she was allowing Barry to nurture her, to do what she always does in her day-to-day, constantly, what is her natural spiritual and emotional mode, which is nurturing. So she's always nurturing. She was just allowing him to nurture her. Every Barry in the room says, why couldn't she just ask? Now, this is the circle and the line in play. Barry wants to get to his destination as fast as possible. He's the conqueror. Sarah's in her nurturing mode, and therefore she doesn't ask, but she allows him to try to nurture her. Now this is played out in so many different scenarios when it comes to stopping and asking for directions. Women, what do women do? When you're lost, what do? You stop and you ask someone to give you help. You allow someone to nurture you. Men are notorious in not wanting to stop for asking directions because you're in your conquest mode. So stopping and needing to ask somebody is such a sense of failure. Yes?
That's not always true, because if I'm lost, I don't hesitate to roll down the car window and ask some Tom, Dick, and Harry which way to go.
Great. Great. And you're going to see a lot of things that I'm saying don't apply, okay? And that's fine. That's good. That means you're great in that area, okay? A lot of things aren't going to apply, and some things are, and sometimes the roles will be reversed. That's what I mentioned. We're doing stereotypes, and we're doing masculine and feminine modes versus men and women. Yes?
Can you explain how it's not asking for what you want nurturing? I don't get it.
How is
it nurturing for the woman to not ask directly?
Because you want him to offer it to you. It's so much more meaningful when he offers to take over, to help you with something, to take over for the kids, to do the dishes, to do whatever it is. We're in that mode constantly where we're constantly anticipating people's needs, that we want someone to anticipate our needs. And it doesn't always work for our favor. In fact, it often doesn't work in our favor. Another example. Barry and Sarah are ready to go out for the evening, okay, for some event, and they're late. And Barry is waiting for Sarah, who's upstairs getting dressed. Finally, she comes down, and she says, so, how do I look? And he says,
We're late.
exactly. She's in her nurturing mode, ready to allow him to nurture her and tell her how pretty she looks. And he's in his conquest mode. Let's just get there already, forgetting that the whole point is this relationship to begin with. This circle and the line, yes?
But is it really allowing him to nurture when she has a pre-established expectation of what she wants?
You're totally right. And if you think logically, it's really stupid that women do that. But we're trying to understand, and it's stupid that men do that when they know that women are doing that, right? But that's what we're trying to understand. Why each are doing what they're doing doesn't mean we're not justifying either modes. But we're trying to say that he's not being insensitive, and she's not being just wishy-washy. She's in her mode, he's in his mode. We both have to learn each other's mode, and sometimes each other's languages, in order to say things directly when we want something, or in order to anticipate what she's trying to ask. So I know every time after this talk, when I ask my husband if he possibly wants a cup of coffee, he's like, coming up right away. But that's after many, many years.
Yeah, can I respond? This gentleman makes a good point because it's fundamentally, you're talking about role playing now, which is not genuine
the good. We all need to look at the bottom line. So if a woman's looking at the bottom line, you want the cup of coffee? Ask for it. And if the man really wants to show his love for her, you know she's doing that. So nurture her.
Yeah.
We both need to look at what's the bottom line in our relationships, because we all want the positive. Yeah, I'm gonna get to you in a minute. I just want to go on a little bit further on this point.
No, when we're done, we'll have a question.
Yeah, very good,
We
very
have
good.
no cards, people want to write down questions, and also comfortable asking, so maybe we should save some questions for you.
Great idea, great idea. Okay, when we talk about this circle and line, we see this in so many different areas. It's fascinating, but when you ask a man to name 4 colors, what are 4 colors?
Blue, yellow, green.
Red, blue, yellow, green. Great. When you ask a woman to describe colors, can we have some colors? Okay, good. Sometimes you'll have things like fuchsia, mauve, green, lavender. Okay, we tend to talk in different shades of color. And when you actually look at the eye structure scientifically, women have more cone-shaped cells in their retina, which is responsible for color, than men do. So we see those variances of the color. We see the whole spectrum of the circle of colors. You know how kids so often say, Mom has eyes behind her head? The kids ever say that? Why don't they ever say, dads have eyes behind their heads? Ever hear that? Well, the reason is because scientifically, women actually have eyes that have a greater peripheral vision, where they can actually almost see 90 degrees around themselves. On the other hand, men have larger eyes, which are much better at tunnel vision for long distances of time. Line, circle. When you talk about the blood flowing through the brain, when a woman talks, the blood flows through the whole brain. When a man talks, the blood flows only to a specific part of the brain. Circle versus line. Any of you have ever a dripping tap in your house that goes drip, 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 drip? When it comes to sensory stimuli, women are better at sensing that drip, drip, drip. But men are better at locating which tap is actually dripping. Circle versus line. This applies in so many areas. You know, they've done studies about managerial styles of women and managers. And they've come to see that women generally, again, this is a stereotype, but generally, women will ask questions. They'll empower teams, whereas the men are better at being speedy decision makers and giving orders, the conquest versus the nurturance. So this is all part of the spiritual, emotional, physical structure in the very first pages of Genesis of how we were actually created as men and women, and the roles that we're each meant to try to accomplish and the tools that we need in order to do so. And what I find is important is to really understand one another. So he's not being insensitive, and she's not being wishy-washy. They're just both doing what they do. How you apply this to your own lives and relationship is once you understand a little bit more of the inner workings, you can now say, well, if that's what that means, then ... How do you want to take that further? And now I want to come to the third point, and that is a system of laws in place based on all that we've been saying. We see that men and women are very different. We see we have different needs. We see there's similarities, of course, but there's a lot of differences. And therefore, Judaism has in place that one door that says main entrance, come right through. It teaches us a system of laws that can help alleviate some of the problems that we're discussing, and that's very in tune with a woman's natural cycle and how to develop the intimate parts of their relationship. We're talking about the laws of family purity, which is a system of laws developed for men and women who are married. In a nutshell, it says basically that when a woman has her menstrual period, and for 7 days thereafter, there is no physical, intimate contact whatsoever between husband and wife. At the end of that period, a woman will immerse in the waters of the mikveh, which is, any of you have seen a mikveh? Nowadays, gorgeous spa-like facilities. But she'll touch the waters of the mikveh, which are pristine waters, spiritual waters, come out of the mikveh, and the couple will resume physical intimacy. Now, Judaism does not look at sexuality like a lot of religions do, as something, oh, dirty, negative, bad, evil. Judaism looks at sexuality as something very holy, something godly. And we look at it in that way, but we also look at it as, and here's a quote here, sexuality is a mighty river. If harnessed, it could bring irrigation and energy. This is on page 3. If unharnessed, it brings floods and destruction. And I want to talk about some of the benefits of this system of living, the system of family purity, and what it really does for a relationship. You know, they say, what is the greatest cause of divorce? What do you guys think? Greatest cause? Infidelity. Good. Complacency. Money. Anything else? Communication. Good.
Lack of communication.
Lack of.
But not being there for each other in times of crisis.
Good. Lack of communication, not being there for each other.
Growing in different directions, particularly if you get married young.
Good. Growing in different directions, maybe not growing together. Good. Abuse. These are all great causes of divorce. No, none of them are the number one cause. The number one cause of divorce is marriage. You can't get divorced if you're not married. Okay, that's the joke. But there's some truth to the joke. And the truth to the joke is that once you're married, you tend to rub each other in the wrong way, and you tend to get bored of each other, and you tend to take each other for granted. That's the number one cause of what marriage does. How do we avoid that? Well, when you are physically apart for 2 weeks of the month, suddenly something happens. You actually, when you are reunited, suddenly there's this monthly honeymoon. Because you're not bored of each other. You don't take each other for granted. Suddenly there's this new excitement in the marriage. Now, we live in highly sexualized times, where women are sexualized in every context possible, on billboards everywhere. We have pornography is rampant. We have premarital sex all the time. And we have husbands and wives who are both trying to do more and more crazy, kinky things in order to get excitement and stimulation. And where has that led us? To more and more and more craziness. Instead, Judaism says, hold on. The solution to it isn't to do more and more and more and get more and more crazy in your life. The solution is to hold back. Very simple. Hold back for 2 weeks, and then you'll see you don't need all these extra things that you thought you need. Very simple solution. That's number one benefit of these laws. Second benefit, if you look on your paper, actually let's read number 8. Who'd like to read under boredom, which is what we were just talking about. Want to read that?
It is the loss of affection, not the emergence of interpersonal issues that sets couples on the path towards divorce. Couples who remain happily married, less than once, express negative feelings less often, and usually remain more positive than other couples. Most important, these feelings remain stable over time.
So in other words, this feeling of taking each other for granted becomes less of an issue when you're able to do these laws. Second thing is the value of restraint. If you look at these studies, these are 2 studies. This is one study that was done about what women want most in a man and what men want most in a woman. It's very interesting what the studies actually say. But what I found and what I'd like to focus on is really the first thing of both men and women. Men and women both want a faithful partner. That's what they want. You want someone who has eyes only for you, who's faithful to you, both men and women. For women it was a little higher, for men it was a little lower, but that's what the number one thing that both of them want. Now, when you can show restraint within a marriage, when you can hold yourself back for 2 weeks within a marriage, you're strengthening and flexing your muscles of self-discipline. And that enables you to show restraint outside of your marriage. So you're not looking at another person because you've trained yourself how and where to direct your sexuality and when. You're encouraging those muscles to exercise that restraint. And if you can do that within your marriage, then it becomes so much easier to do it outside of your marriage. That's the second value of it. Third value is the value of space. Now, I know when we were doing those 4 complaints, those 4 disconnects of men and women, and we said one of them, which was that men say, one men's complaint is you're letting yourself go. Remember, that was when everyone was like, whoa. I think what men are saying when they're saying you're letting yourself go is not only in physical appearance. You know, we're talking so much about how women are such nurturers. And we are. We're nurturers in our day. We're constantly nurturing others. Children, friends, family, we're nurturing. And I think what men are saying by saying you're letting yourself go is they're saying, you used to have a stand. You used to be a person. You used to have needs. And suddenly, you're not saying your needs. You're hinting, oh, let's stop. Do you want a cup of coffee? Say what you want. Be who you are. Stand up to be who you are rather than just letting yourself go by constantly nurturing everyone around us. And what these laws do is they allow a woman to have those times to herself where she's not available in a physical level, where the marriage can be nurtured from an emotional level as well. It's not all about physicality, where he's not just looking at her as his object of desire that he can have whenever he wants, but it gives her this space where she can nurture other aspects of herself. And it's a time period which is very in tune with her own natural rhythm of ebb and flow of desire, when she can become and develop this own part of herself. You know, when you take a rubber band and you stretch it really far, the more you stretch it, the more it wants to bounce back. And the same is true in a relationship. When you stretch it, it needs those times back to itself. And this is this value of space, this value of being able to actualize herself, to see herself as her own person without any rejection of him. It's not a matter that she's rejecting him. This is a set of laws that both have accepted into their relationship. And finally, interestingly, if you look in that section of C, in value of space, you'll see something from Newsweek magazine. This was a few years ago on the cover of Newsweek magazine, which I found was actually fascinating, and it was all about sexless marriages and how rampant it is in America to have sexless marriages. Because at the end of the day, after giving nonstop and nurturing nonstop, the woman is completely depleted, and she has no energy or time or space for anyone else. Contrast that to setting aside a time after 2 weeks when you both know this is going to be a special night, and she prepares herself for this special night, and you do it in a very romantic way. You know, and she gets her pedicure and her spa and whatever, and then you're ready for this intimacy to become that monthly honeymoon. And let's go on to the last one, which is sensuality becomes sacred. Like we said, in Judaism, sexuality is not considered dirty, unholy, or something that's evil. Sexuality is actually considered divine. In the holy temple, the Holy of Holies, that room where the Aron was, that God communicated to us,